My name is Alisson Molinares. I am a registered dietitian here at the MaxWell Clinic. The human and the gut microbiome, this is a hot topic, and it has been for the last few years for a very good reason. There's so much research, much needed research on this area. There's still so much we don't know about it, but there is quite a bit that we do know, and it's very exciting because there are things that we can do to improve it that we didn't know a few years back. So we always hear about microbiomes and more related to the gut microbiota. And so I wanted to start with kind of an overview of what that is. So a microbiome is a rich ecosystem that serves a purpose. And so most people think of the gut microbiome, like I said. However, there are microbiomes everywhere. There's microbiomes in the oceans, in the soils. There are microbiomes even in the atmosphere. When we're talking about the human microbiome more specifically, we're talking about an aggregate of all the microbes in the human body. So not just your gut, but everywhere else. Yes, meaning there is microbiomes in other parts of the body. In fact, there are microbiomes in different tissues of your body. So research is showing that there are microbiomes that are different in your brain than there are in your kidneys or even in your blood, which is great. A little fun fact, each tissue in the microbiome in your left hand is 30% different than your right hand. And that's just based on function. The top of your arms and the bottom of your arms have different types of bacteria, again, because of what they do and where they are throughout the day. So these microbes are everywhere, and they do vary just from left side to right side, which is amazing. When we are talking more specifically about the gut microbiota, we are talking about the organisms that live in your intestine, in your gut. And so we are talking about, as you see in the picture here, those little guys that are all in your small intestine there. And they are hundreds of trillions of them in there. And like I said, that's a rich ecosystem that has a purpose. And we're going to talk about that purpose today. So the three types of microbes that we refer to usually and most often is commensals, which we'll talk about a commensal relationship maybe a little later on, even though I would think it's more of a mutualistic relationship. But they provide the host with essential nutrients and enhance the digestion of the host. Probiotics or symbiotic bacteria, I'm sure you've heard a lot more from them, and they benefit the host by making vitamins and regulating the immune system, which is amazing. Now, pathogens, we've all heard about pathogens ever since we were younger. And so they're disease-causing microbes, and that could be fungi, that could be viruses, that could be parasites, and so on. I want to point out that current research suggests that diversity is key to optimal health. And so it's not just about having more of the commensals of symbiotic and none at all of the pathogenic, or more of the commensals or more of the probiotics and none of the commensals. We need that diversity in order to keep us healthy and for this ecosystem to work. Okay, so everyone kind of wonders, well, where do they come from to begin with? What's going on with them? And if you watch Dr. Ferris's group visit on gut health, you may know this. So I'm going to breeze through this, but I do want to kind of cover the basics for those of you who have not heard that group visit. I do encourage you to go watch it because it is great. So where do the microbes come from? So we used to believe that babies were born completely sterile. There was no microbes on them at all. But we now know that we are getting our microbes transferred to us through the placenta. So newborns are already getting microbes through the placenta, and then they're colonizing those microbes are colonizing the gut of the baby the first 2 years of life. Meaning in those first 2 years of life, they're even being bottle fed or breastfed. They also start playing on the floor with their hands and feet, and all the bacteria start colonizing. Now, what affects them? And there's many things that do. One of those, like we mentioned, is what they're eating. And so there is a difference in the gut microbiome of a newborn that takes in breast milk versus formula. Genetics play a pretty big role, and I like to say that each individual kind of chooses what gut microbiome they get, because we produce some signals that control the structure of the surfaces that are being colonized by the microbiota. So genetics do play a role into what our gut ecosystem looks like. Delivery method, newborns born delivered vaginally versus through a C-section have different microbes than the other way around. So it's interesting that so many babies are being born out through C-section versus vaginally, and we have noticed that there is a difference when this happens. Environment plays a huge role in not just stress and lifestyle, those are key, but also what part of the world you were born in. Most of us, in the US, but even if you were born in India, I personally was in South America, and that makes a difference in our microbes. Climate plays a huge role, where you are getting your food from, what kind of soil. So environment plays a huge role as to what microbes we have in our body. Medications are another key component of this. So many of us know that antibiotics play a huge role, but proton pump inhibitors also play a really big role in your microbes, as well as laxatives and medications like metformin also play a role. So not just antibiotics, although they do play a huge role. And then the foods we eat. Food is key in defining the shape, the structure, and the diversity of your gut. It starts as a baby, whether you are breastfed or bottle fed, and it continues as we age and we get older. Food is huge on this, and we will talk definitely more about foods that are helpful versus foods that are not. But I do want to take a second to emphasize that although sometimes it feels like genetics play a huge role in many things, that for this, we have the power to change our gut microbiota. We have the power to choose, well, not necessarily choose, but to affect what microbes and what our gut microbiome looks like. Food is the quickest way to modulate that. So when we are talking about the gut microbiome, we're wondering, well, so special, what does it do? Okay, so here's a few key things that the microbiome does. We'll dive a little deeper into more specifics a little bit later, but some big takeaways here. They help us digest and metabolize our food. They are protecting us from those pathogenic microbes. As you see down there, that ugly red monster, those are the pathogenic microbes, and our healthy gut microbiota helps us fight off from them, that disease-causing bacteria. They also helps us synthesize vitamins. So we will hear about this a little bit on to help us absorb nutrients from the food that we eat. There's some things that we don't necessarily do on our own, and we require their help. They help us produce anti-inflammatory compounds, and they do play a role in the production of neurotransmitters. So bacteria, our gut bacteria, ferment those fibers that we eat and change them into short-chain fatty acids, which provide our colon with so many benefits. To give you an example, one of the short-chain fatty acids, butyric acid, 70% of the energy for the cells in your intestine come from that. So it is huge what they do for us in changing, those fibers into those short-chain fatty acids. Is something that when we started figuring all this out, we started noticing how important they were. So let's talk a little bit about inflammation in the gut. We hear this often. I'm sure if you are a patient here at MaxWell, you have heard this term before. And maybe some of you have not personally for you, but for family member. But we hear this term, and we hear inflammation all the time. There's tons of anti-inflammatory diets and a lot of articles on anti-inflammatory foods, and just the topic of inflammation comes up quite often for a good reason. So I want to talk to you guys, and again, this is a broad overview of this, but I wanted to talk to you about what could be causing that inflammation in your gut. Why is it happening? And I wanted to give you kind of a few reasons. And like I said, this is broad, but dysbiosis is also a term that gets used quite often. And dysbiosis means not living together in harmony. It means that there is an imbalance between those good commensals and probiotics and those pathogens. And again, dysbiosis doesn't just is not a term just used for your gut microbiome, but it can mean for other microbiomes in your body. In general, dysbiosis just means not living together. That rich ecosystem is no longer living together in harmony. Something is overtaking it. The balance is kind of out of whack. Okay. When we are talking about gut dysbiosis, that's where I mean there is a disbalance between the probiotic, the commensals being overwhelmed by the disease-producing microbes, meaning there is more, there's a parasite, maybe there's yeast, maybe there is bacterial infections, whatever it may be, it causes that ecosystem to be out of balance and not in harmony anymore. There are many reasons for dysbiosis. A lot of them include stress. A lot of them, another reason would be medications like antibiotics that can cause some dysbiosis in your gut, because you are stripping away all of them, and then what you rebuild back really matters. Or food choices, that's also gonna affect whether you're going to have gut dysbiosis or not. Chronic constipation, gastric surgeries. There are many reasons why there may be gut dysbiosis. Now, there are many symptoms that are associated, many diseases associated with dysbiosis. Some of them include irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease, migraines, eczema, autoimmune diseases, bloating, constipation, acne, food allergies, and so many more are correlated with just there being a dysbiosis in your gut, your gut microbiota. Leaky gut. This is also known as like increased intestinal permeability, and although it is not necessarily I think consider right now a disease or an illness, but it is a symptom of inflammation. It is a sign of inflammation and imbalance. For those of you who may not know, leaky gut and intestinal permeability is when those enterocytes, which are the cells in your intestines, they're joined together, but what is called a tight junction. When those tight junctions are then inflamed, they loosen up, they open up, meaning that they're large particles that are exiting and entering into the bloodstream. So they're leaving your gut, entering the bloodstream because those tight junctions are nice and loose, and so they can come out of there. And that's not a good thing to have particles, larger particles in your bloodstream. And your body, of course, responds to it, and it stimulates an antibody reaction. Your body responds to it as a foreign object, and so it reacts, and therefore we go through more antibody reactions than we need to, and it makes things worse. Again, could increase more of that inflammation. Now, like we've said, genetics does play a role as well. There are many diseases associated with dysbiosis that have a genetic component to them. I'm sure most of you guys know celiac has a genetic component, as does irritable inflammatory bowel disease and arthritis even. So genetics does play a role. Now, we don't know exactly how just yet, or it goes on a case by case, but it does play a role in that. And then, of course, your diet is very important. And like we talked about, poor food choices is and can lead to a dysbiosis in your gut. A Western diet low in fiber and high in lots of processed foods is going to lead and cause some inflammation, which leads me to this. What foods disrupt the microbiome? So when we are thinking about, okay, well, I can affect it with what I eat versus what I don't eat, we know that foods that are processed and refined carbohydrates are going to be disruptive to your microbiome. Foods, there's been studies, and fast food has been repeatedly shown to increase dysbiosis. So culprits would be foods high in saturated fats, all those fried foods, artificial sweeteners, and most of us tend to forget or maybe ignore it a little bit, but alcohol can also disrupt the microbiome. And when we are trying to decrease that inflammation overall in your body, in your gut in general, alcohol plays a huge role in that. And so I always point out that most of us are really, really good, especially MaxWell Clinic patients are really good at knowing, like, you don't want all those refined cookies and cereals and pastries. But then we sneak in a few drinks here or there. So I know it's a little convicting, but I think it is a good reminder that that does disrupt our gut microbiome. And it's important that when we are trying to decrease that inflammation, that we stay away from it as well. Okay. So we talked about all that dysbiosis. So it is kind of out of whack. Things are not going right. There may be some leaky gut. There is, good food, not good food choices, and so on. And so we have inflammation in the gut. We have dysbiosis. What now? How do we get it back to normal? How do we balance that? Therapeutic diets. And if you are a patient at the MaxWell Clinic, I think that you are probably familiar with the elimination diet, or maybe the renew food plan. And these are therapeutic diets not intended for long term, but main goal for them is to reduce inflammation. They're both different, of course, and they serve different purposes, but our goal is to get away from those triggers that may be causing some of that inflammation, that may be causing some of those reactions in your body, those antibody reactions. And so that is one way that a clinician may want to be rebalancing your microbiome. In fact, it's kind of a go-to. But I always say just as it's important to take out those food triggers and take out the foods that disrupt the microbiome, I think it's just, if not more, important to add in foods that are going to help you heal your gut microbiome as well. So we move on to then anti-inflammatory foods. When we're talking about anti-inflammatory foods, we are talking about spices. So turmeric or curcumin, berries are great for this. Red and blue fruits and vegetables are, think of blueberries. They tend to be really high in antioxidants and help lower that inflammation. Omega-3s, that fatty fish that raises those good omega-3s can also help lower inflammation. Green teas and herbal teas, and then leafy greens are all great anti-inflammatory foods that we need to be adding in, and not just, I want you to be more intentional about adding in, especially when we're trying to balance that microbiome and reduce that inflammation, being intentional about having those around and making sure we're increasing them. While you're doing a therapeutic diet, or maybe not, depending on what your clinician is wanting you to do. In general, for overall health, I want you having those anti-inflammatory foods. So look at your food plan right now and see if you are having them. Polyphenols are naturally occurring antioxidant compounds, and they're actually correlated with increased bacteria diversity. And polyphenols are actually kind of activated once that bacteria munches on them a little bit, and they help you heal, soothe, and protect your gut. They're the ones that give your fruits and vegetables those colors. And that's why you hear us many, many times say, eat the rainbow, choose fruits and vegetables from different categories, from different colors, because you are getting in polyphenols through there. And they all have, they'll help us with different things. Now, prebiotics and probiotics, that's what we're here for. So prebiotics and probiotics help us reduce inflammation and promote healing. That's exactly what we want when our microbiome is out of balance, when there's dysbiosis or leaky gut inflammation. They inhibit those inflammatory cytokine responses, and so they are going to be great for you. But like I said, the quickest way to modulate your gut microbiota is through food. It is possible to modulate it, to change it. So I want you to know that you can actually change the microbiome within 24 hours just by changing what you eat. You do not have to think that it's going to take months and years. Of course, the longer you do it, the more it's going to improve. But within 24 hours, research has shown that there's started to be some change in what your gut microbiome looks like. So I definitely want to encourage you to think about this and those anti-inflammatory foods, polyphenols, prebiotics and probiotics, and adding them in so that you know that you are healing and balancing that microbiome. Okay. So we move on to prebiotics. I know most of you have heard of probiotics, and I've gotten lots of questions as to, like, well, what is a prebiotic? A lot of us are not maybe as sure as to what a prebiotic is. It doesn't get the hype that it deserves. It is not talked about enough. Prebiotics are food for your microbiome. They feed your microbes. They nourish and stimulate the growth of the gut microbiota. So just as you need food, they need food, and that's what prebiotics are. Prebiotics are substrates in food that the microbes use for them to grow and do their function. That's their food and their nourishment. As humans, we cannot digest and utilize prebiotics, but they can, and they give us the benefits from that. And that's why I was mentioning that it's more like a mutualistic relationship. They get fed and they do their thing, which then benefits us. Now, prebiotics were thought to be just soluble fibers, meaning, your oatmeal, your beans, but the definition has expanded quite a bit. And so now it adds on the plant polyphenols, the polyunsaturated fats, conjugated linoleic acid, and the human milk oligosaccharides, meaning breast milk, is considered now a prebiotic, as it should be. Because like we said, babies are not born sterile, and they do have that gut microbiome as newborns, and when they're being breastfed, their gut bacteria does need that fuel. And human breast milk is considered a prebiotic, which is great. It kind of expands on the definition of what those little microbes can munch on. Now, I want to point out how I started with prebiotics, not probiotics. And there is a reason for that. You need a rich ecosystem, a good environment for your microbes to thrive on. So if you're taking or eating a lot of probiotics, but you are forgetting about your prebiotics, it won't be very helpful. Prebiotics need to come first. You have to fuel them. You have to feed the microbes. And so if you're just focusing on lots and lots of probiotics, but you forget to feed them, then they're not doing their job all that well, because they're starving, they're hungry. So really, really focus that if you are going to be taking probiotics or trying to increase more of those probiotics, that you have that rich environment for them to eat on. And so here are some benefits of prebiotics. There's quite a bit. It's extensive. They promote the growth of beneficial bacteria, like we said, because they feed the microbes and your bacteria in your gut. They enhance bone health and increase that absorption. They increase satiety, regulate your blood sugars and insulin, improve motility, and prevent constipation. That's a big one for a lot of you out there, I know. They stimulate production of neurochemicals, improve that vagal nerve function, protect against colon cancer, help normalize triglycerides, help decrease blood pressure, can help with cholesterol. So there's many, many benefits with prebiotics. And when we talk about what prebiotics are, what foods you need to eat to get those prebiotics, you won't be surprised that these are the benefits from them. So if you look at all these benefits and you're wondering, well, what is it? This is amazing. Like how do I get these probiotics? And this is what prebiotics are. Your fruits, your vegetables, your legumes, your whole grains, whole food, things that I know all clinicians at the MaxWell Clinic talk about. And this is why we talk about them so much, because they're the ones that are feeding your microbes, and they're the ones that are giving us all the short chain fatty acids and all the good things. The list of benefits is extensive, and we know that because we know fruits and vegetables and those polyphenols that come from them, the anti-inflammatory properties from them are great for us. So take notes. I want you to know fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains. Now, I know some of you, for many reasons, may not have one or the other, and that is okay. But I know most of you, if not all, in fact, all of you, need to be having non-starchy vegetables. So when we are talking about avocados and eggplant, tomatoes, all the vegetables, legumes are great unless people necessarily have them very often. But these are prebiotic-rich foods. This is what I'm referring, and this is what has all the benefits. Now, probiotics. I know that you guys have heard about this. They are the good bacteria. They are the microbes that do all those things for us. So prebiotics feeds them. Probiotics is the actual bacteria that we are adding into your gut microbiome. So they, like I said, they're good bacteria, and probiotics actually started as a way to preserve shelf life of food. So they really, really help improve food security and reduce hunger. That was the initial how they initially started, because they were preserved for a lot longer without needing to be refrigerated. Now, of course, you can, and that helps, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but they were intended to extend shelf life, and that has really helped with food security. You know, probiotic and fermented foods are eaten all over the world, and that's how they've started. And so some of the benefits include aiding in protein digestion. They kind of munch on that and get those amino acids out. They convert flavonoids to usable forms. They increase absorption of minerals, including calcium, copper, iron, magnesium, and even manganese. So they're great for that. They help us minimize or eliminate lactose intolerance, which is great, but they also help us synthesize vitamins. Biotin, B vitamins, folate, and vitamin K are some, just to name a few. They help us improve peristalsis and improve transit time. That means bowel movements, they really help with that as well. And they do help us metabolize foreign substances like pesticides and mercury. So probiotics help us with tons and tons of things. Again, these are the microbes in the gut that we want, along with those commensals, to do all their functions. So we talked about prebiotic foods, and now let's talk about probiotic-rich foods. And fermented foods, which we'll get into in a second, are the ones that have that live bacteria in them. So they are fermented vegetables, including sauerkraut and kimchi. Sauerkraut is a fermented cabbage, and kimchi is a traditional Korean condiment made from Napa cabbage, but it could also be made from Korean radishes as well. There are fermented pickles and beets and carrots. And a lot of times we don't think about pickles as being fermented, but more so just pickled, and we see pickled vegetables, but they can definitely be fermented, and they are going to contain some of this good probiotics. Fermented fruits are also probiotic rich, so chutneys and jams, pickled jackfruit, to name a few. And the more common ones include yogurts, kefir, sour cream, plain buttermilk, and kombucha as well are very well known. With those, my biggest tip when I'm speaking to patients about them is to make sure that you are reading on that label that it says live and active cultures. We want to make sure that there are live bacteria in there, and also just checking on the sugar content. A lot of times I've seen kefir with 20 plus grams of sugar in it, and we definitely want to get unsweetened as much as possible. Kombucha can also be pretty high in sugar, and they do that because fermented foods tend to have a sour taste to them, so they add more sugar than we would ideally want. So just choosing some that are on the lower end of sugar. Now, you don't also have to drink an entire kombucha bottle in one day, but you can just add some throughout a week, and not finish it off all at once if you don't want to drink all that sugar as well. Some other, maybe not so well known, but coconut milk kefir or cashew or coconut yogurt can also have those live active bacteria and be probiotic rich. Again, just make sure you're reading the labels for low sugar, and to make sure that they do have that live active bacteria in them as well. Now, natto, miso, tempeh, tamari sauce are all soybean based, and I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with miso. And I do like to point out that when you add the miso paste to whatever broth you're using and it is still boiling, it's going to kill all of the probiotics in it. So make sure that when you're making it, you wait till it cools off a little bit and then add it in, so then you get all the benefits. Otherwise, the benefits are all going to get nixed when you add it to boiling water, essentially. Now, let's get into pickled and fermented. This is a question I get often. So I really want to touch on this because just because something is pickled does not mean that it is fermented. However, it does go the other way around. Fermented foods are by definition pickled because there is a form of acid in there. So pickling involves soaking the food in an acidic liquid, so a vinegar type liquid. You immerse it in an acidic solution like the vinegar, but it also oftentimes involves heat, which kills off and destroys all of the good bacteria. Now, fermentation does not involve a vinegar-like solution, but during fermentation, there are natural sugars found in those fruits and vegetables, and they convert those carbs and sugars into an acid-like form, and that's why they also have that sour taste to them. And it's an ideal environment for preserving your foods. So basically, when you are taking out all the air, all that carbs and sugars are transformed, and that's how you get fermented foods. There is no added acid required, like I said. So if something is fermented, it's by definition pickled, but not the other way around. So pay attention when you see pickled vegetables that they are fermented. Something that I like to tell my patients is that usually I like to shop for fermented foods in the refrigerated section versus in the aisles. So you're going to find pickled and fermented either in the aisles or in the cold refrigerated section. I'm sure many of you have seen kimchi or sauerkraut. It's usually always the refrigerated section, but you have seen that there's maybe pickled vegetables in the aisles. And so if they're they're live fermented foods, they are stored in the fridge because they're still fermenting. How the fridge and the temperature slows down that fermentation process to like snail speed so that they're not extremely sour by the time that you get to them. But there's always the good bacteria when you are getting them from the refrigerated section. Like I said, always read labels. That's always important, just to make sure that you are getting the right thing. Now, how do you incorporate those into your daily routine? Now, prebiotics should be an easy one. I always tell my patients you need lots and lots of those vegetables, whole grains, legumes, whole foods. So I know most of you are getting those prebiotics in. And if you are not, I encourage you to really focus on making sure that every meal you have some form of prebiotic food, whether it's a fruit or it's a vegetable, legumes, or your whole grains. Now, probiotics can be a little more tricky to add in, and I find that people struggle a little more to add them in, maybe because of the taste, maybe because they're doing a specific therapeutic diet or wherever it may be. So I just want to give you guys some good ideas. Salads are the best place for me personally to add in some fermented foods. I love fermented beets. That's kind of a go-to for me. But salads with lots of vegetables, and when you're adding balsamic vinegar already to your salad, the sour taste is not going to affect it or taste weird in your salad. So that would be an easy way. I know lots of you eat salads, so giving it a try, getting some fermented veggies and seeing if you like it. Now, stir fry with kimchi or sauerkraut is also great. It goes kind of hand in hand if you're using those coconut aminos, or even if you're using soy sauce, whatever it may be, those flavors kind of blend very well together. I have many patients who like sauerkraut but not kimchi, so I would give a few a try before you kind of decide that you do not like them. Okay. Miso soup, like I said, traditional in the Japanese cuisine, and I would encourage you to buy the ingredients and try to make it at home as well, because that would be nice, easy broth to have before your meals or with your meals. Smoothies, that's an easy way to add in some of those pre and probiotics. So adding lots of vegetables and adding fruits to your smoothies, you get your prebiotics, and then getting some kombucha, maybe the kefir, the coconut, or just kefir from cow's milk, yogurt, coconut or cashew yogurt with those live active cultures is an easy way to get probiotics every morning in your smoothies. Coconut water kefir is also becoming very popular, and an easy way that it's basically coconut water with probiotics, and that is an easy way to add into salad dressings, to your smoothies, to maybe marinades and things like that. I will give you a recipe on that one in just a second. Fermented vegetables in a breakfast skillet. Now, hear me out. I know this sounds very, very odd. However, in the Japanese cuisine, that is very common, and that's how they use natto for a lot of these. So giving it a try. And then yogurt with fruits as a snack. That's an easy snack that a lot of you do, whether it's, your coconut yogurt or regular cow's milk yogurt. Having those live active cultures as a snack on a daily basis is great. And like I said, here is this balsamic vinaigrette that uses a probiotic coconut water. Now, this is specific from a brand. I was kind of searching different brands, and I found this recipe, and I thought it was definitely great for this. It's the You Got This balsamic vinaigrette. So I know a lot of you go to vinaigrettes for your salad dressings. Easy recipe with olive or avocado oil, but it does add the 2 ounces of the probiotic coconut water. This is something that you're going to keep in the fridge and use throughout, a few days for your meals. And so it's a great way to add some probiotics to your everyday. Any questions from anyone? Let's see if I can pull up the Q&A box here. Just a second. So I'm seeing a question here, and okay. So is there such a thing as too many probiotics? And I will say that if you start out with a ton of them, it won't be ideal. We want to start out slowly is what I'm saying, because it can be a little too much all too soon. So I just want to make sure that you start out slowly. You don't have to add kefir to everything, or add it to your salad dressing and to your smoothie, and also have a yogurt if you feel like you haven't added any of these in a while, or you haven't been eating them regularly. I would start out slowly. Try one of the recipes. All right, let me see. Do I have any? Thank you guys all so much for the sweet comments. I'm glad that you guys found this helpful and informative. I'm so glad that you guys have joined today. Well, if there are not any more questions, let me see. I just got another question. Let's see. After fasting, what is the best way to build up your I'm not sure that I'm understanding this question correctly. Let me see. Build up your okay, so I think they're asking, after fasting, what is the best way to build up your microbiome? And so after fasting, depending on how long you've been fasting for, I always say go for foods that that are soothing to the stomach, a balanced meal with your protein, with lots of the non-starchy vegetables. And if you are eating, some whole grains, and you're definitely getting your prebiotics. Smoothies are also a great way to do this, because smoothies you can make to be a balanced meal. And like I said, a yogurt would be good here. If you do a salad just to break off your fast, and have your first meal be your lunch and be a salad, you can definitely do that dressing that I suggested with some of that prebiotic or probiotic coconut water, and or just having a few sips of kefir with of kombucha with your lunch would also be a good option as well. Any other questions? Okay, so I think we've covered everything. It has been a pleasure, you guys. I'm so glad that I got to do this today. I hope that this was very helpful and informative, and I'm sure I'll be working with a lot of you guys soon. Bye.